The Great Flood is one of the most widely known accounts in the Bible. Some think about the flood as a past real catastrophe. In this article, we take a deeper look into and see if this event has any archaeological evidence for the Bible. The Bible does not explain a local flooding, and the waters dominated exceptionally upon the planet, as well as all the high hillsides that were under the entire paradise were covered, as well as the hills were covered, as well as Noah just lived, and also they that were with him in the ark. Genesis 18:20-23. Different summaries of a fantastic catastrophic old flooding are typical around the globe. The account of the flooding is not simply located amongst the Israelites who came on the scene some 700 years after the floodwaters declined. Checking out the accounts of various other resources from various other societies tells us a lot about the reliability of the Bible record. The Epic of Gilgamesh is most likely the most well-known extra-biblical flood account. Chronologically, this places the Sumerian account rather close to the time of the flooding that the Bible shows. According to the legend, Utnapishtim constructed a watercraft within which he, his loved ones, as well as all types of pets, made it through a flooding that destroyed all the human race. Like the Bible account, Gilgamesh states that the reason for the flooding was human improbity. Both accounts document that sacrifices were offered after the flooding, and also both documents state that the men, Utnapishtim, Noah, were later honored. Gilgamesh differs from the Bible account in a number of ways. However, the similarities as described above are too striking to ignore. An additional archaeological evidence supporting the biblical account of a great flood is found in the Babylonian Ark tablet. This ancient tablet reveals that a god instructed Atrahasis to build a vessel to save himself and the animals from an impending flood. Although the Ark tablet describes the boat as completely round in shape, which differs from the biblical account, the similarities between the two stories are indeed remarkable. The misconception mentions that after human beings were developed, they disobeyed the gods. The exemplary Deucalion and his spouse were saved in an ark from the flooding that ruined the human race. Deucalion's ark landed on a hill, and after surviving the flooding, he offered sacrifices. There's the Hindu story of Manu, who's warned about a flooding and constructs a boat to contain the seeds of life with which to repopulate the earth. His boat, tugged by a fish, comes to rest on a mountaintop, and Manu performs a sacrifice. You can explore further of Welsh and Irish flooding myths, Finnish and Norse blood deluge myths, various African flooding myths, Pacific flooding myths, and ancient American flooding myth. This begs the question, how did all of these completely different people around the world get the same basic and sometimes very specific ideas? In Why Does Nearly Every Culture Have a Tradition of a Global Flood? John Morris, PhD, describes his collection and analysis of more than 200 accounts of floods, initially reported by missionaries, ethnologists, and anthropologists. He writes, "While the differences are not always trivial, the common essence of the stories is illuminating, as compiled below." Is there a favored family? 88% were they warned. 66% is flooding due to the evil of man. 66% is disaster only a flood. 95% was the flood worldwide. 95% is survival due to a boat. 70% were animals also saved. 67% did animals play any part. 73% did survivors land on a hill. 57% was the area local. 82% were birds sent. 35% was the rainbow mentioned. 7% did survivors offer a sacrifice. 13% were specifically 8 people saved. 9%. Morris concludes his article by stating, "The only valid way to understand the widespread similar flood stories is to recognize that all people living today, although separated geographically, linguistically, and culturally, have descended from the few real people who survived a real global flood on a real boat which eventually landed on a real hill. Their descendants now fill the earth, never to forget the real event. And the notion of a great flood must be the most common in human history. As evidenced from archaeological evidence for the Bible, many still scoff at the biblical tale of a great flood. And if the Bible is right about the great flood, what else is it right about?